Hey, this is Zachlog the Great, and I am here tonight once again with Harry Seldon,
Good evening.
and we are getting together to talk about the third book in the Covenant Chronicles by Kai Wai Cheah, the third book being Prince of Shadows. So, before we go any further, I did want to say once again, if you like my work, you like what I do, you want to help support it, you can go to subscribestar.com/Zachlog-the-great, and the link will be in the show description. And having said that, I guess first, well, before we get into anything else, this is not so much a review. This is not a should I read this kind of book. We're going to be going over all kinds of things. There's going to be spoilers. So if you are interested in the book, I would suggest reading it first and then coming back, because we're going to be talking about like plot points from all throughout it.
I would say if you enjoy the Dresden Files, you would probably enjoy this series. There's a decent chance at least, so take that for what it's worth.
So, I guess first thing, just Harry, your first overall impressions. Big things
So
you saw about this one.
so the main things I've been, and I mentioned this in our last discussion, main things I enjoy about this are the world building and the sort of the theological background of this. And theologically, universe is very interesting. We learned a lot more about it here, but I still don't know if we know. I don't. I don't even know if we know if it's monotheistic or not. Uh, I could see it. I could see an argument being made either way, which is weird given who and what we meet over the course of the book.
Yeah, it is definitely it is not clear yet if how the various supernatural entities, including one who is to some degree an analog for the God of Christianity, how they are related to each other, and whether there's basically one overall, or whether they're, I don't know. Yeah, it is, that is not clear yet. Um, but so I will say, again, overall things, um, and I mentioned this just a little bit earlier. Um, you know, English major, lit class kind of a thing. I did kind of detect an overall theme to this book, which I don't think I had seen in the first two. Although looking back, I'm maybe piecing together something for some of them. But and the what I saw in this one relatively late was recruitment, and like how do you get someone over to your side? How do you
Mm,
get someone to be a part of your cause? Um,
that I mean, now that you say it, there's definitely a lot of recruitment going on and a lot of different methods of recruitment, ranging from literally you have no choice to clever, uh, clever ways of twisting your arm, ranging down to just general suggestions and building up of goodwill. There, it runs the whole gamut. I don't know if that's deliberate or not.
but yeah, because there's there's three enemy agents that Luke and his team have to attempt to get some kind of cooperation from at various points. Um, there's what was there's Hikari, both in joining with Ohirume, I'm probably saying these all wrong.
I'm going to go with Ohirume and hope for the best.
There's Hikari joining with Ohirume, and there's also the organization trying to basically subvert Hikari. And then very late in the book, the Unmaker basically says, "Hey," he says to Luke, "Hey, why don't you have one more shot for joining my team?" And so there's several places where this is going on in this book, and it's like at a certain point, I'm like, that's happening a lot. So
I mean, even right at the beginning, I believe the first chapter where we meet Hikari, the second chapter, Subaru tries to recruit her into the National Magic Agency as a cover for the recruiting into the organization, I believe.
Once we found out who he was, I did not go back and notice that he was what he was doing just a little bit earlier. So that's I hadn't noticed that. I should have realized what he was up to, because he.
And what's even more interesting, Ohirume at the beginning, and we're already jumping around a bit. This is not a linear summation of the plot. Ohirume at this point, Hikari asked her, "What should I do?" Basically, should I agree to work with the National Magic Agency? And Ohirume's answer was, "You already know the answer." And Hikari said yes. And that led into getting abducted by the organization. And I found that interesting on a second reading. Why it makes sense. This series definitely has its deities go the mysterious ways route. It makes sense that she wouldn't give a straight answer in this context, but it's still odd that she didn't she didn't make at any point indicate, "Oh yeah, these people, you're walking to the lion's den right now. You might want to have your guard up." And I found that interesting.
Well, I mean, she did. Ohirume did tell her, like, other people are going to be coming for you, and you are going to have to know how to handle yourself. She just didn't tell her this.
That it was these people yes, that's fair.
So, okay. Rewind a bit, possibly what we should have done first. Give a brief plot rundown of this book, which has to more or less assume by this point that you're familiar with the first two, because I'm not doing the whole thing. Not doing the whole series. But 20-minute, to use the TV tropes phrase, 20 minutes into the future, science fiction, alternate history, slightly more advanced technology than ours in general, and also magic, which among other things involves summoning and cooperate and making the use of various supernatural entities. That's the general setting. And in this one, the main character
on the Covenanter Chronicles.
The main character, Luke, is part of a off the books intelligence agency working for the not U.S. government, and also semi willingly working with an archangel of not Islam and an ancient Roman deity. Not entirely by his own choice, but he is basically told, more stuff is more struggle within this supernatural fight is about to go down. Be ready. And what happens is a teenage girl, 15. Do I have that right?
Mm-hmm. 15.
Okay. So a 15-year-old girl um, is empowered by a Japanese sun goddess. It is Japan.
Yes, I noticed that. Japan and Persia. So, for reference, the not United States is Hesperia, England is Anglia, Europe is Pantopia, Greece is Hellas. Um, these are all
Singapore is still
names.
Singapore.
Singapore is still Singapore, Persia is still Persia, and Japan is still Japan. So I'm not sure. It, most of the time, he goes with either um, occasionally made up names like Pantopia, but usually names based on another language's word for something.
Well, another thing is Persia. There is no Persia today. There is, however,
Yes,
Iran.
it's Iran.
Right,
Yes.
and so Iran is Persia. But
Yep.
I had actually a theory about that. This was something I was going to bring up later. But I'm guessing he's largely writing for an American audience. I mean, this is in English. Um, and it's relatively easy. He decided, I think he figured it was relatively easy to getting cultural references and word roots that would say, "Oh, this place here, it's this is not France. It's Gaul.
Hmm.
It's not France." Um, but when he was looking at Asian countries, he's like, "What am I going to call this
I mean, I
that
could go
Americans will?"
Nippon, but I
Yeah,
don't know how many.
yeah,
I don't know
would have
how. I
caught
don't know
that.
if people would know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have caught Nippon, but like I'm guessing that was part of the thought process here. But anyway, um, so this young woman is recruited and empowered by a Japanese sun goddess, much in the same way as Luke and Eve had been by others. Um, and then she is kidnapped by the organization and a worldwide globalist conspiracy to implement one world government,
Hmm.
um, which may or may not be a real thing. Um, but she's kidnapped by the organization, and basically Luke and some of his friends and allies set out on a mission to rescue her, and then things kind of accelerate from there. Right? Um, good, good, short, short description of the basic plot.
Yeah, I would say so. Sets the that sets the stage.
Um, but yeah, and like I said, it was I wasn't really looking for something like this, but at a certain point, I'm like, there sure are a lot of spots where they're trying to persuade someone to join their cause, or and different ways they go about that, and it's and like it became prominent of them, like, you know what, I think this is kind of one of the big ideas the book is about, um, which literary types like myself call the theme, um, when we want to feel pretentious. Um, so but and yeah, and there are different ways that go about that. And so like the very first thing in the very first one of those in this book is Ohirume coming to Hikari, and it's basically like, these people are about to kill you.
Do you want help
I
with that?
Yeah, you have a problem. I can help. And she's like, yes, let's do this. And I have to say, and you might have seen this on my notes, like like that scene where you have a 15-year-old girl, defending herself, all alone against two grown men. Um, I actually found that fight scene like genuinely emotional. like it, I like, and how she, how scared she was, and how she felt, and also her reaction later, like
Yes. Yes.
the next day.
This is going to be incredibly traumatic. I mean, it
Yeah.
would be traumatic for me, and I'm not a 15-year-old girl. I don't know if you knew this or not, so spoilers.
On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
Yeah, I found it interesting too. She went throughout the book. She'll shout the word men occasionally, and at first I had no idea what that meant, so I looked it up. It turns out that's a thing from kendo, which is a Japanese sword-based martial art. There's basically 5 strikes: men, dao, kote, suki. Um, and a lot of times when you're practicing, you specifically shout out which one you're doing as you do it. Like when you're training, so that you're I actually don't know why, because this is like 20 minutes of internet searching. But I found it interesting that she
well,
was
you're an
saying it.
expert now.
Yeah, yes. I found it interesting that she was saying that both when she was actually attacked before she got any kind of power, but also even afterwards. But it makes sense, I think, if that's your only mental frame of reference for what you're doing, it makes sense that you're going to fall back and you're going to act exactly like you did in training.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, and that's part of the point of combat training, is so that once things actually start rolling, you don't have time to think.
exactly. You need it to be all subconscious.
And so like it has to be something you have basically preloaded, a macro, if you will.
And
um
there's the classic and probably urban legend, but maybe it's happened some point. There's a classic story about a martial arts expert who gets mugged and who does a flawless gun disarm on the mugger and then returns the gun, because that's what you do in training. You practice the disarm, and then you turn the gun around, you hand it back pistol first. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I've seen analogous things happen in areas that require a lot of muscle memory, and so it's just little details like that are one of the things I love about these books. The author will really dig down and just go that little extra distance to make things realistic, whether it's this, psychology, or hacking from the previous book, or the language. It's something that there's rarely an individual point like this I can point to, but throughout the book you notice the details. Aside from his Latin, I'm sorry, his Latin is terrible. Aside from
well,
that, he's
it's not
great.
Latin. It's I don't know what he would call it, but
Ugalis,
uh,
probably.
but that sorry, the thing you were saying actually reminded me of something which is totally off topic but amusing. I saw this, and you know what? I never bothered to check this with a different source, so this could be entirely BS. But I saw this. There's a story that 2 guys tried to mug Chuck Norris at knife point.
There's no way the story is true. I don't care what the rest of the story says.
Well, and by the time the police got there, they were both Chuck Norris was standing there and just like waiting for them, and both of these guys were like sitting on the ground with broken arms, and the police got there, and they saw this and they just started laughing their asses off, like, do you know who this is? And now, to be fair, I don't think. I think their response actually kind of makes sense. It's like, I thought this was just like TV. I didn't think he
I
actually.
mean, actually, the odds are decent of that.
Right. And so like a lot of action heroes don't actually wouldn't actually be able to do anything useful. They look very pretty. Um, but Chuck Norris is not one of those. So I should check out that. I should see if I can find any other sources on that story to confirm it.
Yeah, I'll choose to believe it. Don't worry about it.
But anyway, yeah. Ohirume, basically comes to Hikari. Is like, you're probably about to die. I can make that not happen. Which is a pretty compelling sales pitch.
Although it is not the most compelling sales pitch we see in this story.
And so, let's see, what would be the next one? Would be Brunner. When Luke's team captures Brunner, who is a fairly high-level agent of the organization. And basically their primary persuasive point on that is, these people you're working for, they had made plans to kill you. They didn't even tell you about this if you were ever captured. And Brunner, and I actually have in my notes here. Where is that? It's like, yeah, this interrogation seems to go way too easy. And then later it turns out that it was too easy, because while they did get useful information out of them, he was planning on selling them out the whole time. There was then they capture his local asset, Subaru. What did they use on him? How do they we don't see a whole lot of that, because basically he gets killed pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's going on. If I recall correctly, that sort of goes on in the background. It
seems to be more or less just intimidation.
Yeah, because he's not high enough. If I recall correctly, he's not high enough to have a suicide chip.
Right.
And so when they kidnap him, they make sure that that's obviously the first thing that they check. And I think when they find out that he doesn't have one, they realize that he's not going to be that much of a problem. But I'm not sure. I don't remember the details, which means I don't think it was a focus at any point in the story.
I know there was at least one of them where Luke basically was able to play off Eve's emotional instability and basically turn into a good cop, bad cop kind of thing, even though that wasn't the plan. And I think that might have been with Subaru. Actually, and he does that later as well. Although that one seems more intentional. And then, okay, so there's Brunner, there's Subaru. In Singapore, there's John Lee.
There's John Lee. So John Lee is Subaru's immediate boss, I think.
Yes, and basically their main point of leverage against him is, your family thinks you're just this ordinary, decent, hardworking man. So what would they think about the fact that you planned the kidnapping, imprisonment, and torture of a 15-year-old girl?
I will say that was kind of weird. Like if somebody broke into my family's house and kidnapped me, and then showed me a bunch of incriminating videos of my relatives, I'm not sure I would be as quick to believe the videos.
Well, the thing is, if I recall correctly, it wasn't necessarily that they were that persuaded until they saw his reaction.
Yes. Yes. I felt that if he had continued to play dumb, if he just continued to say, I have no idea what you're talking about, maybe utter the word deepfake or something, if it helps, I feel like he wouldn't have convinced, like it would have gone very differently. That was odd.
Well, I mean, but the other thing is he's not dealing with some, he's not just dealing with some hostile,
That's
relatively
true.
faceless interrogators. Like that's his wife, that's his daughter.
Oh, that's true. And he does. We the audience know that the protagonists are not going to hurt his family, but he doesn't. That's a good point.
And so yeah, there's that. And then the next major one would be, you know, Luke has I guess it'd be near death experience.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Because he's
before we get there, I want to mention the Giants because they're back. They're also recruited. They have even less choice than serve or die. Um, they serve. They have to. They're making every effort to get around the compliance chips. Basically, the next level of demon summoning in this book is you summon a demon into a clone body rather than having to expend a regular body to do it. And then you put thought control chips in the head so that the demon can't exceed operational parameters, they would probably call it. I found that thread, both in this book and the previous one, just fascinating. It's a very, very modern take on demon summoning, both in the oh, look how far humanity's come. The Necronomicon's got nothing on us, but also there's a problem when you're fighting death. There's a problem when your enemy exists in the place where you're going to go after you die. It's interesting. It's one of my favorite little side stories here.
it actually I hadn't thought of this before. I just reread recently That Hideous Strength, by C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
It occurs to me that if C.S. Lewis were writing that book, 50 years later, there might be something a lot much similar to this.
I could see it.
Um, but anyway, yeah, and it's the other thing that's kind of funny about those about the giants, the Hecaton Kaires in this book is and they say this themselves once they're free. It's like they kind of thought we were idiots, and it's like no, they're just giving minimal compliance.
Yes.
Um,
I think the exact line was the compliance protocol compelled him to obey his masters, but not competently.
and it's like, well, yes, you force someone intelligent to work for you against his will. You might get the work. You're probably not going to get the intelligence. And there's also it's not really something they have to try very much, but there is a kind of recruitment for them, but it's more or less effortless because it's like, yeah, these people were abusing us for a while. We have a mutual enemy. Let's go do this.
Right.
Um,
Yes. And trying to do the standard infiltration with things like catering trucks with a group of 16 giants turns out to not be trivial.
well, especially when to quote Admiral Akbar, "It's a trap."
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
But yes, that does lead us to to the final recruitment of the book.
yes, and Luke has a near-death experience, and gets once for the third time to come face to face. Well, for the third time in the chronology of this series, for the third time in the current books, and for the fourth time in the series, but gets to come face to face with the Unmaker, and oh wait, well, okay, finish this part. There's who basically says, you're really my kind of guy. You are, murderous and corrupt, and you lie all the time, and, you're probably damned anyway. We're pretty sure about that, so you may as well work for me. Which reasoning Luke rejects, and he is saved by something of a Deus Ex Machina. I don't know if that actually, now that I think about it, I don't know if that really applies when gods are all over the series.
Yes, and we did have a hint of it at the Great Paling earlier in the book. What is it? The Hagia Aletheia in what is not Constantinople, or no, what is not Istanbul? I think.
Yeah.
So
Although
we had hints.
Go ahead.
We had hints that he was going to that there was the equivalent of the Christian God here, even if we didn't expect this kind of immediate and direct intervention.
So in the I don't think in the deprecatory sense the Deus Ex Machina applies.
Something of a literal sense, though.
And I actually just realized I missed one because it was the bad guys. But they a significant part of the story is them attempting to subvert Hikari to their side. And it's actually kind of funny to me because basically at first they use more or less standard torture techniques, infliction of pain, and sleep deprivation, and a very clear message that you have no control over what's happening to you, which are not something I have detailed knowledge of, but I understand all of those are something that are relatively common in this kind of thing. And then go ahead.
The difference was the ability and the level of control. The ability to directly attack, the ability to inflict arbitrary amounts of pain without permanent damage is something that, so far as I know, isn't a solved problem in the real world. If you're torturing somebody in reality, you always risk doing permanent damage, and then it's just a matter of, as mentioned in a Doctor Who episode, the first rule of being interrogated is that you're the only irreplaceable person in the torture chamber. If they're trying to kill you, then show them who's boss. Die faster. If pain comes with a risk of death, you have that option. If it doesn't come with a risk of death, as is the case here with the methods the organization's using, that's substantially harder to beat. And I found that whole sequence sort of unnerving in how Hikari justifies to herself the necessity of giving in. It's just a series of small compromises that even Ohir, I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing it correctly. I know this. But even her patron is letting her compromise, including letting her kill someone innocent in order to stop the pain.
Well, and it's
that was weird.
Well, and basically, I think the thing was, or why Ohirume let it get to that point, was like, she could do a lot there, but without someone to entirely, get her out of the situation immediately, in order to do enough to get Hikari out, she would have to start actually doing real damage to the world itself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and so like I said, it's kind of starts off with more or less standard you know torture techniques, and then once Lin, the yellow ghost, gets involved, um, and it's kind of thing where like you appreciate the intelligence of it, even if it's being used for a horrible end, because then they say, okay, we're going to make you kill, first a small helpless animal, and then an innocent person. And getting someone to violate their own conscience, um, like getting someone to commit that kind of act, that is a pretty powerful way to basically break their will.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think that is what's behind a lot of today's bizarre, propaganda. Like, oh, by the way, Bruce Jenner is a woman now. You get someone to tell an obvious lie that is a lie, and they know is a lie,
And
and
it's a series of small compromises. It's a ratchet effect. If they hadn't, you can see why the Archangel of Not Islam and the Roman deity, you can see why they took such an immediate interest in this case. Because if they hadn't, and I could very well have seen this torture working.
yeah, I mean, if they had her for a couple of weeks more,
Yeah.
then it seems quite likely she basically would have been theirs. Now, there's also the question which has not been addressed. Once this bond has been established, what to what degree can the spirit on the other end of it cut it off? Can Ohirume turn cut
Remove
off
the
this
covenant.
connection, or is it just it's there and they have her?
I've noticed there are multiple references to covenanting being a death sentence, or meriting a death sentence. And that, if it was possible to completely renounce a covenant, you would think that that would be mentioned, even if it's not even if that's not enough to get you out of it. You'd think that that would be mentioned, that, oh, even covenanters who reject it are still condemned, something like that. But there's no reference to that even being a possibility.
Well, there is. Okay, the second part of Luke's near death experience, um, when he is talking to not Jesus, who basically says you need to let go of all these things, and there is some implication that this is something he could do. I mean, well, not just it. No, it's more or less said this is something he could choose to do. Now, the part of
I
the question
thought,
is,
go for it.
well, and part of the question is, I mean, it could be just you can't undo what has been done, but you can choose not to use them. That might be all it means.
I thought it was the implication that if you choose to not go back to Earth, if you choose to have for your soul to remain here, then that sort of overrides the covenant. You've made your choice. I don't know if that renunciation would apply when you're actually back in your real body.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of. I feel like I've seen somewhere else that kind of choice where basically, in fact, I know I've seen this where basically, you're dead. Oh, well, okay. Harry Potter is one place. You're dead. You're here. You can choose to stay here, or you can go back to the fight.
The Dresden Files had that quite explicitly at the end of Ghost Story. And spoilers if you haven't read the Dresden Files, sorry.
Well, I mean, the fact that there are later books, pretty much, is an automatic spoiler on that one.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's actually something kind of like something. What was? Have you ever read Gödel, Escher, Bach?
Yes, by Hofstadter.
Yes, and that was one thing he said. The very nature of the physical medium of the book is automatically spoils certain things about the story, because you can if you're only halfway through the book and it looks like the hero's dead, it's like, well, no, that's not what's happening.
Yeah, you'd have to be brave. You'd have to basically just write another novel and put it in there with vaguely similar sounding things, which somebody's probably done. Be a postmodern art something.
Anyway, but so like I said, that was the kind of big overarching theme I saw in this book, and I think we've pretty much covered that. What were some other either big ideas in this book or some moments that really struck you?
Well, I loved the attempt, the Unmaker talking with Luke on both sides of it. The fact that the Unmaker is basically giving us a plot rundown of the previous two books really helped me remember what those two books had. And it also, he's completely and literally right about everything that he says that we have direct knowledge of. One particular thing he was, and I highlighted this. I forget. It's not deception if they've never directly asked you if you were a Covenanter, yes? You've just fed them information that let them believe you were lucky, skilled, and resourceful. If I told the program that I was a Covenanter, they'd kill me. The Unmaker's laughter rang throughout the court. No, Luke. You only believe they would. And that's because if you were in their shoes, you would do it in a heartbeat without losing sleep. That's fascinating because he might even be right about that. We've seen the organization do all kinds of stuff that wouldn't be legal, technically speaking, and look the other way and ignore things. And we know he was worried that Pete was going to turn on him for covenanting with Al-Hakim. And it turns out that Pete wasn't. He was not going to do it. It's genuinely possible that Luke didn't have to lie there.
Well, and see, the other thing with that is there's the conversation about halfway in the book between Luke and Al-Hakim and Sol Invictus. And Al-Hakim says, you're going to have to tell them eventually, and including Keith, who is the one he's most worried about. And Luke is like, well, that's pretty much gonna kill me. And he's like, and Al-Hakim says, I don't think that's gonna go. I don't think that's gonna go quite how you think. But he also says, B, and I don't remember the exact phrasing, but he says, you do have to handle this very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think Luke's not entirely wrong there. I think if at any point up until now he had just, with at least Keith in specific, he had just, said, "Oh, by the way, here's this demonic mark on my arm," he would have been turned in and most likely dead. So
yeah, it's possible, but it's a very interesting point, and it's one that it seems Luke even it hadn't occurred to him. But
yeah,
the fact that Luke, despite being dead, and he does really believe that he's dead at this point, despite actually being dead, he treats this the way he would treat an interrogation when he's alive. And I really enjoyed that. And realizing that he can't move in any direction except down when the Unmaker asked him to kneel, but he realized that he doesn't have to move at all. He can't run away, he can't turn, but he doesn't have to kneel either. That was a neat it was a neat twist, because reading this chapter the first time, reading it through, obviously I didn't think Luke was going to go for it, but I didn't see how he would. I didn't see what he could say that would negate what the Unmaker is saying. And the fact that his answer is just not moving was makes sense given the kind of person he was in life. So he's not the only character we've seen go to the afterlife. He is the character we've seen handle it the best, I think.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit of shades of the Divine Comedy here, because he gets a visit to hell. He is brought to heaven, and the first thing he sees, not the first thing, but one of the points of contact in heaven is this girl he had had this attachment to, who had been taken away, who had died well before him. Anyway, that was not quite on point with what you were saying, but that was one thing I was thinking.
It's an interesting parallel. All right, and now if we're back on the theology, so I don't think that Al-Hakim, the Archangel of Not Islam, serves the Source, who apparently is a, if not necessarily a triune being, then at least a multiple being, because the Source is always referred to in the plural, the way we might refer to the Trinity. And the Source apparently, long, long ago, just up and left the universe and left Al-Hakim running things. That's what we heard in the first book. And in the second book, we got an inkling that the creator of not Christianity is there. And here we directly meet him. And I was wondering, okay, well, is the creator and the Source just the same being? Because that would simplify things a lot. But I don't see how.
Well, and also Hakim specifically rejects that, because
yes.
Hakim and Sol Invictus come to meet Luke, and they say, if you're heading back, we're your ride. And,
yes.
And they both say, look, we're not again. They both say to not Jesus, basically, we're not against you, but we're not working for you either.
Yes. I think Sol Invictus says something like, "I know who my father is, and he isn't yours," or words to that effect.
Yes, that's the general phrasing.
And that's so. So who did make the universe in this? We see that there are references to a whole pantheon of elder gods. And these elder gods, is one of them. So in the very beginning, we have a dream sequence where Luke talks to Al-Hakem and Sol Invictus. And Al-Hakem and Sol Invictus show him basically the broader universe. And Luke sees what at first he mistakes for constellations, but he realizes are living beings moving out in the void, becoming active again. And one of them, I think, was Ohirume.
Yes.
But I'm not
Well, I don't know at that point, but
100% sure.
She does come to talk to him in one of those dream conversations. I think the second one in the book. And Sol Invictus and Hakim are not happy about this. They're like, buzz off. This is not your. Yeah, this is a private conversation. You're not part of it.
Yeah, it's like I would, if I were in this universe, I would be really concerned for my immortal soul, and not necessarily concerned in the same way as am I going to follow virtue and avoid vice, that sort of thing. No, I would be concerned that whoever I was praying to could actually get me to the afterlife in one piece, because that does not seem to be guaranteed. It seems like there's sort of trade agreements and standoffs. Uh, that's not super comforting. So it's, in one sense, it's not surprising that they don't tell more of humanity about this, because that would some people would probably take that worse. Some people would probably be perfectly happy thinking, oh, I'm in a religion, and oh yeah, God, he's fictional, but it makes me feel good and all that. Some people would probably be way happier with that than this.
I will say and this is something I probably should have touched on earlier. When Luke first almost dies, and he's at this bridge. Like, that is a really cool setup for like the you're dead, what's the next part?
Mm-hmm.
And like, basically you're at this bridge and you have to walk across this to if you make it to paradise. And it's that I don't know enough about Islam or other religions to know how closely he was drawing on anything else, but like, that's wherever that comes from. That's a fascinating idea, and it's yeah.
I was going to ask you if you knew where that was from, because it's not something I recognize, but it feels archetypical. It doesn't.
Yeah,
It feels like an adaptation of an idea that already existed. It doesn't feel like something that he invented specifically for this book.
I mean,
It
it's solid enough that
like the Egyptian.
Weighing your soul against the feather.
No. To get there, you need to take the boat of a million years, I think. And it's a voyage. Hold on, I'm looking. All right, the Chinvat Bridge, the Bridge of Judgment or beam-shaped bridge in Zoroastrianism, is the sifting bridge which separates the world of the living from the world of the dead. All souls must cross the bridge upon death. The bridge is guarded by two four-eyed dogs. Interesting.
Who gave them glasses?
And if a person has been wicked, the bridge will appear narrow, and a demon will drag their soul into the house of lies. Okay. So that's probably where this is coming from.
Yeah. So that sounds pretty close. So yeah, that works. But I mean it, and not just the overall idea, but I think the specific implementation here is pretty good. Um,
Mhm.
oh, but let's see. Were there any other major points you wanted to hit quick or?
We've covered most of the major things except for one character, and that is Lynn. And
Yes, he was okay. Before we go there, I do want to say I am a little worried that my battery. I'm working on a laptop. Um, it's plugged in, but this isn't the charger it's supposed to have, and it shows the battery slowly declining. So I don't know. I might be cut off at any point. Well, not at any point, but I might be suddenly cut off. So I will let you know. I will let you know when we're getting closer, if that seems likely to happen. But yeah, Lynn. He was in the second book. He was referred to in the second book and showed up very briefly. And in this one, he's basically becoming a serious antagonist.
Mhm. And he is also a Covenanter. Um,
With who?
yes, because I don't think it's the Unmaker.
Like yeah, but like that yeah, that was the first thing I was like, is it with the Unmaker himself? Because like the the just the fact that he survives two of these encounters, like I don't know who else is gonna be is at that power level.
I mean,
Um,
the other Covenanters we see, Luke, Eve, and Hikari, I don't think they would survive what he survived in this book.
well, and then
Uh,
there's also and this is not entire. Well, okay, there seems to be two different things going on with them. One is that there's a more or less standard set of Scion abilities. And Luke and Eve's covenant basically gives them a better access to these than most people. Um, but they, but like anyone who has sufficient psi capability can do some of the same things they do.
right.
But then there also seems to be a few things where this god can do this thing, this angel can do this thing. That's their thing. Um,
And we saw that even with the first book, with time compression, where no,
Second.
it was a second. Yes, you're right. It was the second book, but we saw that with time manipulation. The
Mm-mm.
Unmaker,
No, wait. I'm sorry.
yeah,
It was the first book. That was the thing in the first book. In the second book, it was the electromagnetic
uh,
fields shields.
yes,
Okay, sorry.
but
Oh,
in both cases, we had one thing that Al Hakim could do, and one thing that Sol Invictus could do, and the Unmaker basically manipulated the situation so that he would be present while these things were being done and could basically see how it was done, which is
um,
interesting that he couldn't just know that, but it's a sign of what's going on in this larger fight.
well, and there is I don't know if you caught this. There is a reference to that in this book. Because in one of Zarka's scenes, um, he's like, "Oh, these ones here are learning fascinating things about KERR black holes, which is what
Yes, which is
Eve
what
used
Eve used and Sol
for the time
Invictus.
for the time
Hmm.
manipulation." So yes, there's also kind of a background note. This is moving. This plot point is moving forward, even if you don't see it right now. Um. Anyway, go ahead.
But so Lynn is covenanted with something, and as far as unless I missed it, we don't know what. But whatever it is, Lynn has pretty good offense, but the defense when he takes a particle beam to the chest, his patron says, "You're not going to die from something this minor," and that like so as far as we can see, nobody else is on that level. I'm very interested to see what that's about. I wasn't impressed. There was one scene I wasn't quite impressed by, where he sneaks a knife into a secure area. And the way he does it, he has a knife in his sleeve and he bends down to tie a shoe and slips the knife into the shoe. But if he had just had a knife hidden in his shoes to begin with, he wouldn't have needed any fancy sleight of hand. So I wasn't writing wise. I don't know. It's super minor, but it stuck out at me as being sort of, I don't know, maybe a little lazy. You see a scene like that, you're expecting something out of Now You See Me, if you've ever seen that movie. But either way, Lynn seems to be. I don't know. Do you think he's being built up as sort of uh, a primary multi-book antagonist, like an opposite to our heroes?
Well, I mean, they have there is that little tag at the end. Zarka's on his yacht,
Yes.
and he gets a message from Lynn, who survived. There's no point in having that if he's not coming back. So, if he
That's
doesn't,
true.
that's just bad writing. Um,
Yeah, fair.
now I will say, and this is one thing. Are you familiar with the TV series Heroes?
No. I
Okay.
mean, I know of it, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, and like first season was fantastic. And then second season and on it started going pretty rapidly downhill. And okay, no one pays me to write anything. So, maybe I'm just blowing smoke. At the same time, I really felt like a large part of the reason it it started going down was they apparently killed one of the main villains at the end of the first season, and then they brought his character back, and it was just like I kind of felt like their unwillingness to let this character go, um and they had to write around that, and bring him back, and then they didn't really know what to do with him, and I felt like that was a kind of big fail point for that TV series from then on.
It's
I thought that was where things started to go wrong.
it's not the only TV series. I can think of several other. I don't know if you've ever seen The Flash, but that had a very similar thing. It built up a very strong villain, had the climactic showdown, had the dramatic defeat, and death and erasure from time. It's a long story. Um, by season three, but the actor was a phenomenal actor, and they couldn't bear to get rid of him. By season three, they couldn't explain. They had to explain how it is that their main villain even exists anymore. As far as I know, by the end of by right now in season seven, they can't even explain why he exists anymore. The show has given up trying to make a rationale for it. It's I think maybe a decent rule of thumb would be never bring back a character unless the resurrection's a bigger deal than the death was. I don't know, rule of thumb, because it can be done well. And certainly if nobody could survive that, but they never found the body, that's fair game, realistically speaking. So maybe that's a compromise. But on the topic of superhero references, there's an episode of Justice League where the Justice League meets their alternate selves from a parallel universe in which they became the Justice Lords and they took over the planet. And Batman has this very dramatic confrontation with his alternate self. Basically, he was telling his alternate self, "How could you do something like this?" You grab power. And his other self responded, "And with that power, I've created a world where no 8-year-old will ever lose his parents because of some punk with a gun." And the writers planned for our Batman to make a witty response to that and win the argument. And then the writers wrote that line and realized, no, they can't. There is no response to that Batman would make. That strikes so close to who he is that he can't. And so he simply he stepped out, he dropped his weapon and said, "You win." I saw something very similar with Zarka, who may or may not be equivalent to a real person whose name begins with S. I don't know.
Yes, yeah, that was yes, him and President Mason.
President Mason, yes. There are certain parallels that we might make with this that maybe we're wrong. Who knows? But I found it gave Zarka very much that same motivation, where he grew up in the Soviet Union, and his early life was just awful, and he managed even from that to climb out and to build a solid life for himself. And then the Third World War came along and wiped him out again and killed everyone he cared about. And at that point, he decided that a one world government is the only way to stop this sort of thing from happening again. And that any kind of abstract ideals that would say otherwise don't, he weighs them against the images in his mind of the horrors he's seen. And he said, yeah, abstractions just aren't heavy enough. I'm weighing them against a feather and it's not enough. I found that very realistic, or not realistic. I found that very persuasive. I could see a real person who starts out with good intentions becoming the leader of an openly evil organization for this sort of purpose. And with this sort of role.
It's also there's I don't know how much of Orson Scott Card you've read. General rule, by the way, if Orson Scott Card starts a new series, read the first 2 or 3 books and then just stop.
Well, I read Ender's Game, and I never read any of the others in that series, so maybe I'm coming out ahead.
Speaker for the Dead is excellent. Xenocide is a little bit abstract and kind of drawn out. And then from there it starts to get worse. And so read the first 2 books at least, sometimes the third, and then stop. But anyway, Orson Scott Card actually has in where is it? I have it. I should. Or I've misplaced it in. Oh, there it is. Here, this right here. The Worthing. Can you see that?
Yep, I can see you. I'm sharing my screen. I'm sharing my screen really quick. This seemed relevant.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, Orson Scott Card. This book right here. It's kind of weird because in some sense there's not a good the problem of pain and why does God allow these things to continue? Like, and in a lot of ways, it's hard to address that in a purely philosophical sense, but in a artistic sense, the Worthing Saga by Orson Scott Card is one of the best answers I have seen to that. And it's pretty fascinating because what is yeah, no, I mean, this is kind of the inciting incident, so it's not spoiling anything. Basically, there are these, technically they're humans, but they have accumulated so much power that they're more or less gods who have, for a long time kept, the rest of the world, the rest of humanity, from, you know, from pain, from suffering of any kind, through, more or less constantly watching over them. And then basically they find one of their forefathers from the far, far distant past, and he was in some kind of suspended animation or something, and they woke him up, and he looked at what they'd done. And he said, "This is horrifying. What are you doing?" And they see what they understand his point, but they also can't live with themselves letting this go. So they, if I remember correctly, they basically all kill themselves. And suddenly, pain and suffering re-enters the human experience. And we see these people who, with no warning, with no explanation, are suddenly dealing with that again. And it's, like I said, philosophically, it's a much tougher nut to crack. But like artistically, that is the best answer I have seen to that, and it's a fascinating book.
Wow.
Anyway,
okay.
I don't know if it's in print these days, but so to return to the book we were more directly discussing. This also, and to get to kind of philosophical themes. There is one moment I really liked in, where is it? I have it on my chapter notes here if I can find it. It's in part 3, chapter 1, and Eve is talking to Hikari shortly after they rescue her, and Eve is explaining who they are, who these people are, and what they do, and says, and Eve says, oh, and Hikari says, well, that's not nice, and Eve says, we're not nice people, but you saved me. We try to be good people. And Eve finally says, nice people do things because they want to make others feel good. Good people do things because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes being good and being nice aren't the same thing. And this is to me a very important idea, and I'm glad to see someone else touching on this one, because I think a lot of problems that Christians in specific are facing today is because we have confused being good and being nice, and they're not the same thing. And sometimes not only are they not the same thing, sometimes they are directly opposed. And it's and so I really liked that moment.
I hadn't made any kind of I hadn't noted that when reading, but that is a nice moment.
Yeah, and it's well, that's like I said, that's an idea that's been kind of at the very least in the back of my head for a long time. And I actually did one of my kind of commentary videos about that. And good and nice are not the same thing, and sometimes trying to be nice is not only not good, but can lead you straight to into downright evil.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. Anyway, whew. Let's see if there's any other oh, one this is entirely tangential. It is kind of funny to me. They have the one of the things they confront here in the book. They go when they go to the lab in Gaul, and they have a lithium draw there, which is a basically they're mining this resource. But basically to do that, they have to open up a portal to hell, with all of the potential downsides of that, and it's in this tower. It's entirely tangential, but it's kind of funny to me because I immediately thought of this. There's this shareware video game I played a long time ago. It's Excelsior Phase 1 Lysandia, and there is a to use the TV tropes term, there's an unobtainium in this game called Aramo, and the only place you find eventually a source of this, the only source you find of this is it's being mined in a tower. And when I saw that, I'm like,
interesting parallel, yes.
And and also just when I saw that in the video game, I'm like, how do you mine something in a tower? That doesn't make a lot of sense.
Given what we see here, that actually does seem something like a reasonable security measure. Given that there's given that your soul can get sucked in if you get too close. I could see you wanting to put that far away from ground level, and up might be easier than down.
Oh, one other point from this, and I think I kind of referenced this in our last conversation. O'Connor, who is kind of, but not exactly Luke's boss. It's a not 100% clearly defined relationship. But I kind of feel like this book is the first time he has a real purpose as a part of the story.
His purpose is generally to say no and then begrudgingly give a little bit of help, generally speaking.
Right, but like in the previous ones, he went along too quickly and too much. It's like, and I feel like in this one he's finally like, I'm sorry, I have to start drawing lines, and like that. At that point, I'm like, I feel like, okay, now I see why this character is here. Whereas previously, he tended to go along, if not 100% of the way, like 75% at least. And it's like, why do you even have this character here? I don't dislike him, but like in terms of the plot structure, he wasn't adding much, and so I see, and so that was kind of nice.
Well, I mentioned in the last video, I was wondering whether or not maybe if he wasn't explicitly part of the organization, whether he really was on their side. Simply because his job in the plot seemed to be to get in their way, and I'm still not totally sure. He does reluctantly help, and so far, even here, he manages to at least give a location, and not have them all killed. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know. Something feels off about him.
Well,
Maybe it is just writing, but maybe not.
The sense I get in this one is that he is on their side, but he answers to people, some of whom are with the organization, and he's not 100% sure like how much. Like, he doesn't know where everything's falling out just yet.
That's likely. I found it interesting that his boss's main priority is not the Taliban.
Yeah.
Which and Schwartz's his goal is actually, okay, if we can get not America to do a major operation in not Afghanistan, and it goes badly, then that ties up nearly all American military resources. I found that interesting, given that this book was written, what, 7 months ago?
Published 7 months
Published
ago,
7
which
months ago.
means it was written
probably a year
something
ago,
like
probably.
a year ago. Yeah.
And it seems to be this. Maybe I'm drawing. Maybe I'm looking too much into this. There's NISA, the clandestine organization that they work for, was saying that not Taliban were doing chatter about a quote unquote birthday party. They're saying everybody who's somebody is talking about balloons and decorations and house guests. And I'm thinking, 20th anniversary of 9/11. That could be the analogy that he's going for here. Maybe that's a stretch, but it seems that this group is both genuinely powerful, because we see in the beginning of the book, we see our heroes go up against them and have trouble, and they have agents throughout the world. They're doing genuine attacks. They're not nobody, but yet they also seem to be a distraction of some kind. They seem to be a very visible, very active target, while the organization can operate much more covertly. So I'm curious to know where that plot line's going. Are they just going to fold? Are they going to, could be an enemy mine situation where they team up against the organization if they discover it's a common enemy. I don't know.
That, considering that, he's at this point, he's more or less putting, globalists as the major enemy. I wouldn't have thought of that. But that actually seems like something he could plausibly pull off, with at least some of them.
Yeah, I'm not saying literally the whole organization, but you might have a cell that defects.
Yeah, and that, because, nationalists, even if they don't like each other, and even if they have, conflicts, major conflicts or disagreements with each other, nationalists can, both look at each other and say, you know what, these people over here, they are threatening both of us.
Right.
And so that would be interesting. That would make for a very interesting story in, possibly book 4. I don't know.
Especially if the whole recruitment theme continues apace.
Well,
it's not a plot line I would have guessed in book 1, but I think now it's on the table.
Well, and especially because Luke is working for, among other people, um, you know, one of the holiest figures of not Islam.
Mm-hmm. That
So
has to that has to
that's
mean something, at least among the devout. For the devout among them.
that's interesting. We'll see what happens. That actually that does remind me of something which I hadn't I probably was going to forget otherwise. I do hope that Cheah has an overall plan, or at least like an end goal that he's working towards. I hope this doesn't just continue indefinitely and kind of wander all over the place. Um, because like um, and this is kind of my main reference for this. Um, the more time goes by, the more I respect Bill Watterson, the
For
artist.
ending Calvin and Hobbes.
Right, the artist behind Calvin and Hobbes, for saying, "I have told the story I meant to tell. It's time to stop." Because in that format, he could just keep going indefinitely. But then, like I've seen other comic strips and books and TV shows that just keep going, and you're like, no, no, oh, stop at a high point. Stop when you've finished your story and it's time to go.
Right.
And I am more and more growing to respect that kind of decision, and I do hope there is a I do hope he's working towards an end goal. Um, but
Well, so far, I remember saying either I said or you said something very similar last time. So far, I'm not getting the sense that it's just wandering. I'm definitely getting the sense that there is a coherent plot line. So, as far as the next book goes, uh, Wache definitely has, like he has my interest.
um, okay, so my relatively minor thing on this, the the uh the chapter where they are invading and taking over the tower, um, for me, that fight scene just went on too long. Um, it's like there's two things. Like, for one thing, it's hard to maintain that kind of emotional energy for a long time, and also when you start when you're talking about when you're describing a scene like that, um, you have to have it hold your attention. You have to be able to put it in terms where the reader can at least vaguely put, you know, this character here, that antagonist there, and be able to frame everything, like, okay, what are they facing, and what's the overall, field. And about halfway through that fight, I just lost that. It's just like things are happening. Who is where? What is this person facing? I don't know anymore.
So
Um,
I thought part of that was intentional, but I could be completely wrong. I thought part of it was because we were seeing so much of it from Hikari's point of view, as opposed to Luke's or Eve's. We're seeing it from the point of view of somebody who isn't used to this sort of situation, who doesn't know how to frame it. Eventually, as it goes on long enough, it's just going to be noise and pain.
um,
It's not going to be structured the way somebody who is an expert would look at it.
I will say, the chapter where Hikari shuts it down, and the way she does that
Yeah,
I
that was
like
good.
that. I really did like that one. And so something that I didn't work was immediately followed by something that worked very well.
And
Um,
I'll do the reverse. The final fight with Lynn, I thought that was weirdly too short. where Luke. Now, granted, part of it was because Lynn was going to survive, but uh, at one point, Lynn basically has Luke. He has him heavily injured, and then Luke just thinks something like, "Okay, I have to get serious. I can't take any more chances with this guy," and then just wins. And I wasn't quite sure how that happened, or what he did to win. It just seems that one moment he was losing, and the next he'd already won. And so that I thought was weird.
Well, there's also even if he won, it was barely not a he barely didn't die. He should have
Yeah.
died. And so yeah. Uh, but yeah. I do have one more big idea from this. And that is when Luke is, when Luke is, basically in heaven. The Empyrean, is that the term they use? I think that's the term. Um, and he's like, well, why didn't I see this before? Like, why did that suddenly appear? I was right here, and it seemed like this suddenly just popped into existence, and probably Angela is the one who was talking to that point. She's like, well, things work a little differently here, and you can't see what you're not looking for. And I actually thought that was I kind of liked that. It reminded me a little bit of the dwarves in the
In the
last
last
book of
Narnia book.
yeah.
Yes.
And so yeah, I thought because I mean, and it's not just that book. It's partly the real world. You're not going to see something you're not looking for. And so yeah, I liked that element too.
Yes, that was a good bit. Um, and getting I didn't really have that any kind of emotional. I mean, I found the conversation interesting. It moving the plot along, moving the characters along. I didn't really see any emotional resonance in him meeting with Angela again. I don't know why. Maybe I mean the romance between Pete and Eve I mentioned, not Pete and Eve, sorry, between Luke and Eve I mentioned last book. I did not find terribly convincing. Uh, so maybe that's part of it. Maybe I'm still slightly soured. Um, I didn't. I don't know. If Angela had been somebody we knew for a book who had died, and then this same conversation had happened, I think it would have been very different. As it was, I don't think it quite did what Che wanted it to do.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it, but I do see the kind of thing you're talking about there. Okay, well, we are at an hour and a half. I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to. Was there anything else you wanted to? Were there any other big points you wanted to talk about on this one?
No, I think I got everything.
Okay, well, in that case, thank you for joining me. For those who stuck around for this whole conversation, thank you for watching. I hope you found it interesting, and God bless and good night.